Hey, welcome back to the Welsh Wire. We are thrilled you are tuned in with us again, and we have a terrific guest today from beautiful Grand Rapids, Michigan. We have our friend Larry Faragalli. Larry is the CEO of a wonderful company called Brightly. Larry, welcome to the Welsh Wire.
Thank you for having me.
We are so glad you could join us today to talk with us a little bit about something that may be a bit of a mystique to our listeners, and but it's your world. You know it, you live it every day. That's the world of digital transformation. But before we get into that, Larry, I'd love for you to tell folks your story about Brightly, a little bit about your journey as an entrepreneur and the great company that you founded.
Sure. Well, thank you for that really kind intro. I'm originally actually from the East Coast, the greater Philadelphia area. And I grew up in a family of designers, and I fell in love with technology really early. At the time I wanted to make video games. So that was like kind of the thing that got me started.
I love it.
And it was very early in kind of digital becoming a thing. So, I probably started working professionally in the design and programming space in the mid to late 90s. Before moving to Michigan actually to do digital for Central Michigan University. And
my alma mater. I didn't
oh,
even realize that.
Excellent. Yeah.
Fire up chips.
Indeed. I did. I was there for a few years doing digital for their distance learning division. And I had originally kind of intended to go back east or head out west after the few years I was going to put in there. But I fell in love with Michigan. I ended up staying, and quite a while later, I ended up co-founding Brightly with my business partner, Marianne Siebert. And, our goal, both having worked in software development and technology companies, was really to start a design-led and kind of research-driven technology firm. So to kind of take that customer and user advocacy and really bake it into everything that we did, whether it was software or apps or large-scale e-commerce sites. And so over the past 10 years, we've been servicing hundreds of clients. We've done that both nationally and internationally for startups and small businesses, all the way up to mid-market and enterprise companies. And I think we've managed to really kind of fulfill our mission of always taking that user first, customer first, kind of business first approach, and not just relying on the technology.
Clearly, it's worked well for you, because recently you were just awarded one of the spots on Michigan's 50 companies to watch.
Yeah, thank you. That was a big deal for us. We were really excited about that.
It is a big deal. Congratulations. Yeah, we're thrilled for you about that, and so deserving. So you and your team spend a lot of time talking with companies about how they can do what they do better and how you can help them get there. And you call that process really digital transformation. So for lay people like me, Larry, honestly, what does that mean? And why does it matter? Tell us about that.
Sure. So digital transformation isn't, just a Brightly term or approach. It's kind of an industry-wide thing in technology, and it applies to all kinds of businesses. So I think the kind of standard accepted definition is digital transformation is the adoption of some kind of technology in your organization to transform your services or your business by replacing manual processes or analog processes that you're doing with some kind of technology, or to replace legacy technology with newer and more modern tools. And you'll hear people either calling that digital transformation, or now, because everybody loves their buzzwords, they're starting to call it digitization too. So doing that, right, there's kind of three core components to any digital transformation effort, and it's transformation of your business model. So, while we traditionally used to let people come to our business and rent cassette tapes or videotapes to watch movies, now we're delivering that in streaming content online, right? That was a kind of an industry-wide digital transformation. And then there's operational digital transformation. We're trying to become more efficient. We're trying to upgrade, our ERP system and integrate that into some kind of service delivery to our clients. And then there's, the digital transformation that focuses on customer experience, which is probably the one that the average person butts up against the most, right? It's compelling online experiences, making it easy to sign up for things, giving people kind of a frictionless sales funnel to go through, being able to configure advanced products online or get online consultations. And So that's I think what average people see when an organization takes strong steps, to become more digitally mature.
Right.
And for why it matters, I think, short term, the most obvious, right, is that, we've been going through this pandemic, and it's forced a ton of businesses to kind of rethink the way that they're doing business and the way that they're delivering their goods or services. But that's, kind of pre-pandemic, just for years, as the average consumer and the B2B buyer and researcher gets, younger and younger, we're dealing with millennials who are used to having online experiences, with their smartphone or online shopping, and they kind of have the same expectation. I mean, they have the same expectation professionally too, to not be interfacing with dated systems or working with companies that have like really onerous kind of manual processes. So the market's kind of been shifting that way a little bit each year. And then there's, digital transformation is making it possible for very young companies to move very quickly and to do more with less. And that's enabling a lot of companies to kind of come out of the woodwork and really disrupt, the markets where older incumbent companies that are kind of standing still are no longer able to compete. So it's really important to kind of think about this as, how are we better delivering our products to a shifting, changing audience and a shifting, changing world? But also, do I have to look over my shoulder and be a lot more worried about competitors that could come out of the blue and kind of eat our lunch?
Right. I get that. And I get that for the older, more mature businesses, this is maybe even more of an acute issue for the reasons you just said. The younger, more nimble companies are automatically thinking this way and moving and doing business this way, but older, more mature companies, not so much. Yep. So it sounds like everybody needs to care about digital This is more than like the marketing department or the IT department, because I heard you say pretty clearly, we're talking about industry change, we're talking about operational change, and then we're talking about, maybe your digital footprint, your branding, your presence on the internet. And I'm guessing that, your company, my company, a company you work with, could be really good in one of those areas and not so good in another. And Brightly, the work that you do in transformation kind of brings it all together. Is that?
Yeah, that's absolutely fair. It's every business kind of has their own unique experience with this. To your point, some are very strong in one area and weak in others, or sometimes they're strong in all areas because of the Herculean effort of employees overcoming things and doing redundant things and having a ton of manual processes, so that at the end of the day the work is still getting done and it's being done well and the product's being created and it's being created well, but there's so much hardship for the people that are doing it, and it thins up your profit margins, and it cuts into, for manufacturing companies, it creates waste, it cuts into efficiency, it makes it harder to get from order to fulfillment. And we live in a world now where there are ways to kind of tie all that together and focus in on where it hurts and address those problems.
Right. It sounds like in most companies, there isn't anybody that really thinks of this. I mean, if you're a Fortune 500 company, you've probably got a chief strategy officer that's their job to look out for these kind of things. Yep. But, most of our listeners, let's be honest, Larry, we're in West Michigan. Most of our listeners are small to mid-sized companies, right? Who are out there every day trying to do the best that they can, running great organizations, but don't often have time to step back up like this at that 10,000 foot view and take a look at the whole digital experience of their whole organization. So, I'm thinking this is not really on the radar for most small to mid-sized companies, but I think you're saying it should be. It definitely has a place for smaller companies, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So, digital transformation initiatives are important regardless of the size of your business. And I think a lot of people, when they hear digital transformation, right, they think it's an IT initiative. They think it's about buying a piece of software and that's just going to fix their problem. We have a problem.
Exactly. Enhancing the website. Yeah. Let's put a new website out there and fluff up our social media a little bit. Snap. We have it covered, right?
And I can't tell you how many people have done that and then suddenly sit there twiddling their thumbs, wondering why they're not instantly being buried in a mountain of leads and they're not all converting, right? There's kind of an entire chain of things that you need to look at, not just getting somebody to your company. You know, it's not about just buying a piece of software and throwing it at it. It's about being really intentional about how you're using that technology to kind of further whatever your business goals are. So it's
Right.
a focus on evolving your business model, like I was saying earlier, or a focus on gaining more efficiency, or a focus on changing how you're interacting with your customers. And I can't think of any size business that isn't beneficial to, right? And
Oh, for sure.
it's different, you know, based on the type of business that you are.
Yeah.
So, for example, a retail business is going to probably lean heavily into their online shopping experience, right?
Yep.
And a customer outreach. Whereas a manufacturing company, you know, they might focus on operational technology at the factory floor level, or maybe creating easier ways for, you know, their B2B customers and vendors to get order information and, you know, flow and status information about where their product is in the manufacturing phase. And I
Yeah.
think nowadays, regardless of the size of business, you know, and I'm seeing it a lot, especially in kind of pandemic times, there's a tendency for a lot of businesses to pull back on spending on things like marketing or IT or strategic initiatives
Yes.
when times are tough or
Doesn't seem
uncertain,
important. Yep.
right?
Yep.
And or they think they're too small to worry about it, and that's a problem that bigger companies need to worry about. And honestly, it's, you know, this is when those investments have the most benefit and impact in your organization. It's
So
when
true.
times are tough.
So true. And you know, you mentioned a little bit about disruption in an industry, right? I mean,
Hmm.
that's one of the things that I'm sure you can help with in a great way when it comes to talking about this, because thinking differently and outside the box about how you can do what you do, as you mentioned, going from cassette tapes to videotapes to now everything streams
Yep.
online, right? I
Yep.
mean, that kind of disruption, and if you can be the leader or the disruptor in your industry in that kind of a manner, boy, you can be so far ahead. And the pandemic has taught us that disruption happens, and
Hmm.
it can be a really good thing for companies who get on the curve of that, right? And get out ahead
Absolutely.
of it.
It's, I mean, you know, hardship is almost always the biggest catalyst for change,
Yeah.
right? Whether that's some kind of market pressure, or, you know, a competitor came out of nowhere and is suddenly, you know, radically changing your business model and you're scrambling to catch up. The thing is that, at least as far as I've seen, right, I've been doing this for like 25 years now, the bar isn't very high for the amount of change an organization needs to make to really create noise in an industry. You know, people embrace the
That's
status
good.
quo. They do. I mean, people embrace the status quo. They think that, you know, our industry isn't going to change, or it's changed as much as it's going to. I don't have to worry about these things. And, you know, it's somebody that tweaks one little thing, right? Like significantly superior online experience, or far better customer service, or, you know, my employees don't have to do terrible manual processes, and therefore I can create the same amount of product with a third of the amount of people.
Yeah.
Um,
Oh,
you
Larry, I
know,
love that. Yeah, no, I do. I love that, because I think as business owners and leaders, we have the tendency to think that to be an innovator means coming up with something big and
mhm,
brilliant, and it's going to take a lot of time and energy and, of course, money, right?
right. Yep.
To get it all done. And your point that, you know, just these small seismic shifts, as I sometimes call it, just a little bit of a shift, right,
Hmm.
can make a huge difference in your business and your impact in your industry and your customer base.
Hmm.
Wow, that's really encouraging. And I mean, that's the kind of stuff that you do. Okay,
Yeah.
so clearly you've convinced me this is something that all business leaders need to be caring about, concerned about,
Hmm.
regardless of the size of their organization, regardless of what their market is going through right now. They need to be thinking ahead about what
Hmm.
digital transformation can do, should do in their company.
Yep.
So,
Absolutely.
what does it look like when it happens? I mean, can you give us some examples of clients or, you know, types of businesses that you've worked with that have kind of gone through this process, and where they started and where they ended up?
Sure. So, you know, by merit of what we do, a lot of it's confidential and proprietary. So I have to be a little vague
Sure.
here, but I can definitely paint in broad strokes, you know, what we're seeing across many, you know, many different types. Because we work with clients who are manufacturing, entertainment industry, consumer packaged goods. You know, we've worked with healthcare, insurance and finance, education. So we've touched so many different verticals, and, you know, we get to see quite a bit, and a lot of disparate, verticals that are businesses that are far apart from each other, that have a lot of similar problems. So it's just kind of interesting to see how it all shakes out. With our manufacturing clients, usually, they've been around a long time. They're, medium to upper mid-market size companies. They've acquired a ton of technology over time. Most of it's very outdated, AS400 in the server room, it's all kind of loosely tied together. And in almost all instances, right, like they have the same key problems. It's very difficult to get real-time data in their organization to leadership. And it forces them to be super reactive. It's really difficult to provide timely information about the manufacturing status or order status of their products to their customers. Or, they have a really inefficient process on the factory floor, and quality control is suffering and they're creating a lot of waste, right? So in all of those instances, I would say, and most of the time, right, we end up with customers that also happen to have like relatively complex products, things that have lots of configurations, things that are difficult to quote, so customers are trying to configure things ahead of placing an order. They're trying to track order status. They're trying to get, the best possible price on whatever it is that they're buying. And these manufacturing companies it's a lot of lift to be able to deliver on those things when you don't have the tools in place to make that significantly simpler, right?
Yep. Oh yeah. A lot of man hours, a lot of looking at multiple systems, a lot of running around like a chicken with your head cut off trying to get answers. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. I think some people are probably listening going, yep, that's us.
It's everybody, really. Being honest, it's everybody, right?
Yeah,
it takes an outside perspective sometime to kind of hold you accountable for making those changes in your organization, for giving you a fresh lens on it. So for us, right, when we're engaging with these companies in any vertical, but I'll just go back to manufacturing. We open everything with kind of an audit and a research phase where, we dig in deep, we meet with the department heads, we meet with the leadership, you involve all the stakeholders and you map out, like, what does this look like from the moment my customer places an order to the moment that order is fulfilled, or to the moment that somebody inquires about our service and we deliver on that service. And then afterwards, like, how do we map out our entire kind of organizational ecosystem and look at how to make, kind of meaningful improvement in any of those areas. So in some cases that was, building a new modern software front end so that their customer experience didn't show through all the legacy software systems that they were sitting on top of that were kind of Frankenstein together to keep the organization running. That's another thing. A lot of organizations will, and I don't think they do it intentionally, but they put their internal problems onto the customer and they make it the customer's problem by, having a poor experience or a poor interface.
Yes.
So,
and we don't often step back and look at it that way, do we?
No, we don't. And again, it's nice to have other folks to keep you accountable for that, and give you that kind of, and to go talk to your customers and find out where it hurts,
Right.
So that's a lot of what we see in manufacturing and retail. Like I said earlier, the market, pandemic aside, has become ridiculously competitive with Amazon and all the big, online retailers cutting into your profit base and cutting into your customers. And people are lazy and don't want to leave their house. And, if I can get everything from one place and have it all delivered to the front of my house, you have to have a more compelling reason for me to come to you, and that's just the way it is now. So, if you're a retail shop, a lot of our retail customers are thinking deeply about, okay, how do I provide more personalization to my customers? How do I have more targeted offerings? How can I give people a similarly, seamless experience of visibility into shipping and fulfillment and delivery? How do I make myself more effective at fulfillment? Especially
great questions to ask.
Yeah, and so those, that's a lot of what we're seeing on the retail side. And kind of mirroring retail is healthcare, where most of the digital transformation efforts are around how do I enable better healthcare remotely? People, people are sick and can't leave their house. How do I provide better experiences for the elderly or underserved populations when it comes to purchasing insurance? How do I provide kind of meaningful education? And through each of these kind of manufacturing or retail or healthcare, when we engage with an organization, you always see the same kind of improvements, right? It's an improvement to efficiency, an improvement to profitability, a reduction in, the demands of your labor force. But there's also kind of intangible ones too, right? Like when you provide a better customer experience, customer satisfaction, loyalty and retention go up.
So true.
Word of mouth marketing goes up because people talk about how easy it is to do business with you. And, there's also, and I think a lot of organizations overlook this, there's a concept that when you're providing a superior experience, when you're providing more education to your customers, you're creating a more capable and knowledgeable consumer. And not just for yourself, but kind of for everybody in your vertical, right? And an educated consumer is going to be a better consumer because they're going to engage with you more deeply than somebody that's kind of just one and done and you never hear from them again.
Right. Yeah. Everybody wants to work with the winner, with the leader, with the one that's cutting edge and really does it differently. And that's endearing. Your comments and your insight are so terrific, Larry. And I think to some extent, it's because you've seen so many different industries. And you can bring that perspective. There are manufacturing, retail, healthcare, 3 very different industries, yet there are similar and common threads that run through all 3 of them that I bet you beg and borrow and, use back and forth between with what you see one to another and bring that information to your clients. It's really insightful in a way that, they just can't grasp themselves, but you bring that. It's really cool.
Thank you. Thank you.
So,
go ahead.
For many of our listeners, to be honest with you, I'm thinking an alarm probably just went off for them and they're thinking, okay, I have never really spent time thinking about digital transformation, or maybe they have and said, I don't know what you call this, but our systems are a mess and there's got to be a better way to do this. Okay. So I'm guessing they're saying, I think I got to need to do something different here. Right. So how do you start this journey in your organization? How do you start digital transformation?
Sure. So, I think I said it earlier, but people need to get over the idea that this is something that happens in the IT department, right? It's a kind of fundamental mindset change that most businesses need to step outside of. Technology isn't just about putting, another server on the rack or buying a piece of software. It's about making it easier to do your business and about making you easier to do business with, right? So it's thinking that way, it's adopting and promoting a culture of continuous improvement inside of your organization, right? Where you're creating positive and meaningful experiences for customers and the partners that you work with, and quite frankly, your employees too. So, the most actionable things that you can do, the best way to get started is talk to people. Survey your customers, interview your employees, interview your salespeople, your customer service people, find out where they're experiencing the pain and the pinch points. And then, and most importantly, right, document everything. You got to find out what's working. You got to get it all down in one place so that people can start looking at things holistically. As you're beginning to map out your company strategy or as you're revisiting it on a yearly basis, you need to document that journey, the journey that the customer goes through from the moment they place an order to the moment that order is fulfilled in whatever sector you're in and whatever service or product you're creating. And you need to use that map as a North Star to look at, where there are weak points in your organization and where you have opportunities to improve. It helps to have an outside perspective for this, but it isn't necessary if you're willing to put in the work and dig in. This stuff has to happen. The decision can come from the top, but any successful digital transformation has to go all the way down to the lowliest employee in your company, right? Everybody has to be bought in.
You're right. Yeah.
Or it's not going to work, And I guess lastly, I would say digital transformation is so unique to each company, and it's such a personal endeavor because it's kind of like lifting up the hood of your business and finding all the places where there's a little bit of rust, And
yes.
I think one of the most meaningful things you can do is just talk to other business owners, read a lot about what other people are doing, whether it's in your space or not. It's important to educate yourself and understand, what is working for other organizations so that you don't have to make a bunch of expensive mistakes going into it, right? I think people have a tendency to imagine what the solution is before they fully understand the problem, and that causes people to spend a lot of money moving in the wrong direction instead of kind of putting in the legwork to do the research and validate it up front.
Yeah, I can see that. You have laid out really a case for why digital transformation should matter to every organization, regardless of the size, regardless of the industry. It's important, even in the midst of the pandemic. If you think your marketing funds or whatever funds are short, right?
Yep.
This is really one of the most important things you can do at a time when all of our businesses are going through radical change. Whether we like it or not, it's much better to be driving the bus, I think, right?
Yep.
And proactively
Absolutely.
doing it. And you're saying, you know, it can be done if you're willing to put in the time and ask the critical questions and go all the way down to the shop floor employee and that frontline employee and relearn and re-educate yourself about how you do what you do, when you do it, and then work to develop a plan to really transform your operation. Yeah, this is great information. So Larry, let me ask you, if our listeners today are saying, I would love to chat with Larry just a little bit more and learn what Brightly does, or ask him a few questions about this whole concept, what's the best way to reach you, Larry?
Well, the easiest way to get a hold of me is probably either we can be contacted through our website. It's teambrightly.com. Or they can email me directly at Larry, Larry, at teambrightly.com.
Wonderful. Well, Larry, thank you so much for being our guest today on the Welsh Wire.
Well, thank you so much for having me. This was fun.
It's been a pleasure. Listeners, thanks for tuning in again with Larry Faragalli, the CEO of Brightly in beautiful Grand Rapids. And we're thrilled that you joined us today. Tune in again next time. Thanks for being with us.